Hello, so today I'm going to show you how to do this feather and fan chevron or ripple stitch that I've used to make this baby blanket. I've also used this same stitch to design a vest top, which I'm currently in the process of writing up. It's going to take me some time. So I've had quite a few people on my Instagram account asking me about this stitch pattern, so I thought I'd just share the basic stitch pattern in case you want to make yourself a blanket or throw. So with this blanket here, it's baby blanket, I'm using 4-ply hand dyed yarn, which is a superfine merino with a bit of nylon in it. It's been hand dyed by Almas, who runs the Etsy shop WitchCraftyLady. I'll put a link in the video in the comments in case you want to check out her lovely hand dyed and hand spun yarns as well as fibres. So in this demonstration I'm using a 4-ply yarn and a 3.5mm hook. I think if you're going to go for double knit or sport weight, you might want a 4mm hook, you know, and then just go up. You don't want this. You'd probably use a slightly larger hook than what you would normally use, because you want a nice drapey fabric for this. You don't want it to be too stiff. So this feather and fan ripple motif stitch pattern is a 19 stitch pattern repeat. So in this little video tutorial I'm going to do 3 ripples. So if you have a look at this other one I've made, by that I mean we're going to do 3 stitch repeats. So we've got if we call this the beginning, we've got 1 2 3. So we need to chain 57. Chain 57. Now I always like to work into the back ridge of the chain when I'm working my stitches, because then it leaves you with the nice side of the chain for working any borders into, and it also means the start of your first row edge looks the same as your last row edge if you're making a blanket. So let's start. We're going to chain 3, which is going to count as our first double crochet, and then we're going to put 2 double crochets into the 4th chain from the hook. So remember, I've flipped my chain over and I'm going into the back ridge, so putting 2 in there. Now I'm going to put 3 double crochets into the next chain. So from now on, when I say chain, I mean the back ridge of the chain. Now I am going to make 7 double crochets, but each time I make one of the double crochets I'm going to skip a chain. So skip a chain, 1 double crochet, skip a chain, 2 double crochet, skip a chain, 3, skip a chain, 4, skip a chain, 5, skip a chain, 6, skip a chain, 7. Now I'm going to skip another chain, and then I'm going to do a series of clusters. So I'm going to be skipping a chain and putting 3 double crochet into the next chain. So that's 1 cluster, 3 double crochets into the next chain, 2 clusters, 3 double crochet into the next chain, that's 3 clusters and 3 double crochets into the next chain. So it should look like this. You can already see it's starting to create that ripple stitch where you're increasing with the clusters and decreasing where you're skipping the chains. So as you can guess, I'm now going to do another 7 double crochets, each time skipping one of the chains. So skip a chain, 1 double crochet, skip a chain, 2 double crochet, skip a chain, 3 double crochet, skip a chain, 4, skip a chain, 5, skip a chain, 6, skip a chain, 7. Should be looking like a wiggly worm. Now we're going to make 4 sets of 3 double crochet clusters, but remember you're going to skip a chain before you start those. Skip a chain, 3 into the next chain, that's 1 set, double crochet 3 times into the next chain, that is 2 clusters, double crochet 3 times into the next chain, that's 3 lots of clusters, and then 3 double crochet into this next chain, that's 4 clusters. Now another 7 double crochets into the chain, but we're going to skip 1 each time. So skip a chain, 1 double crochet, skip a chain, 2, skip a chain, 3, skip a chain, 4, skip a chain, 5, skip a chain, 6, skip a chain, 7. So if you did the correct number of chains and all the correct number of stitches, you should have 3 chains left. So you're going to skip 1 and then you're going to put 3 double crochets into the next one, and then 3 double crochets into the last chain. So at the end of this first row, your little ripple stitch sampler should look like this. Now we're ready to get on to row 2. So we're going to chain 3, which will count as our first stitch. Then we're going to turn the work and we're going to put 2 double crochets into this first stitch. So we've got 3 there. 3 double crochet into the next stitch. Now we're going to do the same as on the chain, but this time we're skipping stitches rather than chains. So 7 double crochets, each time skipping a stitch. Skip a stitch 1, skip a stitch 2, skip a stitch 3, skip a stitch 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're going to skip a stitch and do our four lots of 3 double crochet clusters. Remember to skip a stitch first. 1, 2, this ball of wool is really not unwinding very well. 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So it should look like this. You can already start to see the pattern forming. Next, it's 7 double crochets, each time skipping a stitch. Skip a stitch 1, skip a stitch 2, skip a stitch 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so just going to give you a little tip here on how to keep this ripple stitch on track, because if you'll know anything about how ripple stitches and chevron blankets are formed, it's by continually stacking increases and decreases in the same spots. So for however many increases you've made, you've got to make the same amount of decreases to keep it the even stitch count. And at the same time, you've always got to stack the increases in the same point each round, and also the decreases stacking on top of each other. When you're doing a ripple stitch, it's quite easy to kind of lose track, or especially when you get into a good rhythm and you're doing very long rows. So it can be easy to accidentally offset the ripple, and then it starts to not look like a proper ripple stitch anymore. So with this particular stitch, I would use the increase 3 double crochet clusters as a really good reference point to keeping yourself on track every time. So as you come to make your set of 3 double crochet clusters, they should always be falling on the, if you look here, you've got four sets. So the start of the pattern repeat is this in between, after this 6th double crochet. So you've got 1 cluster here, 1 cluster there, so it's the 2nd cluster. So this is the start, or the end in this case, of the pattern repeat. So your first 2 3 double crochet clusters always need to land in this last, in the 6th one, if you're counting from this side, and the 5th one. So if that doesn't happen, then you need to track back and find out where you've gone wrong. So you may have made too few clusters, too many clusters, you may have not skipped a stitch, you may have skipped 2 stitches. There's all kinds of reasons why your ripple isn't matching up. So just go back over that. So to keep track, every time I come to one of these sets of 4 clusters, I sort of split them down the middle, splitting off the 2 to the right as my guide to where my next set of clusters need to go. So I need to fit two sets of clusters, one in the 5th double crochet, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and one in the 6th, which is there. So if I skip the next stitch to do my cluster, I can see that that has actually fallen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 perfectly in the right spot. And then my second cluster is falling into the last stitch of these two clusters, so that's perfect. So that means I'm keeping on track. So I tend to do that every single time I get to one of these increase humps, as you call them. So let's just finish off this row. Hopefully that wasn't too rambling and you get the general gist. This pattern, it will also be on my blog. It's a written pattern with a I'll draw a little chart as well. I know some people are visual pattern readers and they need to see the chart. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and again 7 double crochets, skipping a stitch. Skip a stitch, double crochet, skip a stitch, 2, skip a stitch, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and again here my last two clusters should be falling in. If you look, the last stitch is a chain and then the next stitch from the left is a proper double crochet. So there's always going to be a cluster in the chain 3 and then a cluster in the next double crochet from the left. So if my first cluster, if I skip a stitch and my first cluster falls into what is the penultimate stitch, really, if you count the chain 3, then I know that I'm on target. So this is always the tricky bit, getting into this chain. I'm a big advocate of going properly into the chain and not just going into that chain space and then doing all stitches, because it leaves a hole that I find really unattractive. So what I tend to do to get into this chain, so if you don't struggle, then you know this probably isn't relevant to you, but I know this is a problem a lot of people have, trying to crochet into the third chain of the beginning chain 3. I look at the stitch, find the left and the right legs of the chain, or hold the left leg, because what happens is as soon as you put your hook, start trying to put your hook into the right leg, it pulls that left leg so short that you can never get your hook in. So I pinch that left leg to make sure it doesn't get pulled too tight when I go into the right leg, and then I go into the left leg, and then you've got the perfect entry into that chain, rather than going round the whole thing or only catching one leg, which can look quite horrible, especially if you're making this blanket and you're not going to put a border on the edge and you're having a raw edge. You really want that to look as good as it can. So let's have a look at row 2. Looks a bit like the Loch Ness monster, doesn't it? You can really see it's starting to get its nice ripple shape, and then you just carry on. All the rounds are the same as, from now on, are the same as round 2. So here I've done a few more rows. I've also washed and blocked this little piece, which has really helped to open up the stitch pattern, especially in the feather detail. You won't get this so much if you use a synthetic fibre such as acrylic, because it doesn't really tend to work very well with lacy stitches like this. So natural fibres work better. This is a wool and cotton blend that I've got from Hobby. I can include a link in that. I actually bought it in a sale, so it was quite a good price, and it's actually a really nice yarn to work with. I would recommend it. So if you visit my blog post in relation to this video, you'll also find a chart and some written instructions, and also just a few pointers on if you would like to make a blanket out of this, just a few suggestions for size and how much yarn you might need. Okay, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you like this. I've got lots more stuff coming up, and also like this video. Thank you.